Welcome back to the Legal Brief, the show where we crush the various legal myths and misinformation surrounding various areas of the gun world. I'm your host, Adam Kraut, and today we're talking about carrying firearms on postal property, and no, we're not discussing shipping firearms through the mail.
TacPack offers some of the highest quality tactical and EDC gear in a monthly package shipped right to your door. They aren't focused on sending you a bunch of crap. They want to make sure that you get gear you will actually use, featuring things like knives, tourniquets, multi-tools, AR-15 parts, and survival gear. TacPack is bound to have gear that you're going to love. And we're switching it up again, so if you order right now, you can get either a free knife or a free multi-tool with the code TGC Knife or TGC Tool at TacPack.com.
The topic of post offices comes up rather frequently in conversation with regard to firearms. It is a place that many of us travel to in order to send certain things, and a place that some of us have to travel to in order to collect our mail, since the post office actually doesn't deliver it to all residences. For instance, John here has a P.O. box for TGC. As we have previously discussed, federal law prohibits the possession of firearms in federal facilities. This would include post offices. I think most of you were already aware of that, given the signs you usually see posted all throughout the post office. And no, it doesn't only ban revolvers. While this is relatively straightforward, the question arises in the context of the post office parking lot. Can you carry a firearm to the post office, park in the post office parking lot, and leave your firearm in the car while you retrieve your mail or ship something? The answer, which may surprise some of you, is no. The federal regulations state, notwithstanding the provisions of any other law, rule, or regulation, no person while on postal property may carry firearms, either openly or concealed, or store the same on postal property, except for official purposes. In other words, a person cannot carry or store a firearm on postal property unless it is for official purposes. I know some of you are going to say, but Adam, my car isn't postal property. You're right, it probably isn't, unless it's one of those sweet trucks. However, it is parked on postal property, and that is where the problem lies. Tab Bonidy, a Coloradan who lived in a rural area, felt that such restriction violated his Second Amendment rights and brought suit against the United States Postal Service. He claimed that the restriction was unconstitutional as applied to him because it violated his Second Amendment right to bring a gun into the post office and store a gun in his car while he picked up his mail. Mr. Bonidy lived in an area where he had to retrieve his mail from the post office since they didn't deliver to him. The district court held that the postal regulation prohibiting him from carrying his firearm into the post office was constitutional, but the prohibition on storing a firearm in his car was not. As you may have guessed, the government wasn't quite happy with that outcome, so it appealed the decision to the 10th Circuit. The 10th Circuit ruled that the parking lot adjacent to the actual building was considered postal property, and as such, the post office could prohibit firearms from being stored in a vehicle. In part, it relied on language found in Heller, which stated, "Nothing in our opinion should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places, such as schools and government buildings." For what it's worth, that particular sentence as a whole has been the subject of a lot of controversy and interpretation. The court offered two approaches which it could find the prohibition was constitutional. First, it looked at the layout of the parking lot, finding that it was attached to the postal building and was for the exclusive use of it. It also noted that there was a postal drop box, which meant postal transactions took place in the parking lot. As such, it found that the language quoted in Heller applied to the parking lot as well as the building. However, because the court felt that the parking lot was a matter which was closely contested, it offered an alternative analysis. The court posited the right to bear arms recognized in Heller in the home would apply, although with less force outside of the home. The court stated that the post office, acting as a proprietor and not as a sovereign government agency, had a broad discretion to govern business operations according to rules it deems appropriate. It also found that the difference between the ban in Heller and McDonald were starkly different than the one in this instance. It stated, "The regulation challenged here applies only to discrete parcels of land owned by USPS and affects private citizens only insofar as they are doing business with USPS on USPS property. And the regulation is directly relevant to USPS's business objectives, which include providing a safe environment for its patrons and employees." Applying an intermediate scrutiny analysis, the court determined the regulation was sufficiently tailored to the United States Postal Service's important government interests. Remember, intermediate scrutiny requires the government's stated objective to be important, and there has to be a reasonable fit between the challenged regulation and the asserted objective. In this instance, the fit between the important interest in safety and the prohibition of carrying firearms on the property. As such, it upheld the constitutionality of the regulation. I've included the decision in the description for your reading pleasure. The case was appealed to the Supreme Court, where it was denied certiorari. Two of the attorneys at the firm I work for drafted an Amicus Brief, a friend of the court brief, which was filed prior to the denial. You can find that in the description as well. So, what should you do if you have to go to the post office and you have your gun? Well, there's a few options. The first, you could leave your gun at home, but I know most of you probably don't want to do that, and I don't blame you. You could park in a parking lot that is not on post office property, store your firearm securely, walk to the post office, conduct your business, and then return to your car. Or you could send someone else to handle your mail for you. Hopefully that clears up some of the confusion that exists surrounding firearms in postal facilities. If you guys like this episode, you know what to do. Hit that like button and share it around with your friends. Be sure to check out my website, adamkraut.com. Remember, if you have a question you want answered on the show, head on over to the legal brief section on theguncollective.com. Don't forget to like The Gun Collective on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Full30, Snapchat, and wherever else you can catch us on social media. And as always, thanks for watching.
The shirts worn in today's episode of The Legal Brief have been provided by Patriot Patch. Click the link in the description to learn more.